are beginning so we'll be having the first session today by Dr. Vinayachandra Banavathy, and I'm very, very happy that he has accepted our invitation and joining us today. He is a member of the founding team of the Chanakya University. He currently holds the position of the Director, Communications and Director, Center for Indian Knowledge Systems at the Chanakya University. He is the co-founder of Indica Yoga, a platform that offers authentic, immersive, transformative yoga experiences and training. He holds a PhD degree on psychological insights in the Vedas from Pondicherry Central University. Besides masters in Sanskrit, English, yogic science, and applied psychology, Dr. Vinayachandra had the fortune of being trained in rigorous traditional Gurukulam education in Sanskrit and Indian philosophy with a focus on yoga and Vedanta at Veda Vijnana Gurukulam, Bangalore for 6 years. Dr. Vinayachandra is a dedicated teacher who has traveled across the world, conducting courses, lectures, workshops on a unique blend of yoga, psychology, and Sanskrit. He's been a guest faculty resource person at various universities and yoga associations in Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Israel, China, Ireland, Italy, France, Singapore, and the USA. Dr. Vinayachandra brings with him nearly 2 decades of rich experience in the domain of research, teaching, policy formulation, owing to his varied engagements. He was a visiting faculty at the Department of Contemplative and Behavioral Sciences at the Sri Sri University, Cuttack, Odisha. He has served as a senior consultant to the committee to draft the national education policy under the chairmanship of Dr. K. Kasturi Rangan, set up by the Ministry of Education, Government of India, Director of Veda Vijnana Shodha Samsthanam, a Bangalore-based research center dedicated to Sanskrit and Shastric studies. He has taught or conducted research at several other universities or institutions. His publications include a report on the standardization of yoga terminologies for the World Health Organization, Perspectives on Indian Psychology, a book co-edited by Dr. Anuradha Chowdhury, and Happiness, Indic Perspectives, another co-authored book in addition to his academic interests. He's also passionate about working with children and youth and is involved with several cultural and service organizations in this regard. He is also curated and organized many festivals, conferences, workshops, and camps on the themes mentioned earlier. That was Dr. Vinayachandra ji. Welcome to you, sir. We are very, very proud and privileged to have you amidst us. We also have Dr. Arunima ji, Secretary from CBSE. Ma'am, can I request you to say a few words and formally inaugurate the session for this year? We are going to have a series of sessions, and we are very, very proud and privileged that you could take out some time for us, and children would be really motivated to hear from you. So over to Arunima, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So very good morning to all of you, respected Dr. Vinayachandra ji, and all the teachers, and I think a lot of students I can see. How many students are there, ma'am?
There are 170 students have registered, ma'am, from Amrita Vidyalayam Thuthukudi, Arya Gurukul Kalyan, SSRVM Cochin, Chinmaya International Residential School, Chinmaya Vidyalaya Nagapatnam, Chinmaya Vidyalaya Chenganur, Chinmaya Vidyalaya Pallavu, Chinmaya Vidyalaya Kannur, and Kasargod. 8 teachers have registered. We have a principal from Chinmaya International School and from the Pallavur School are also present here. So, I mean, all of this motivates us to keep our journey on.
So the children who have joined today's meeting, they are from class 11, right?
Yeah, class 11, and they are doing the KTPI syllabus curriculum as part of their optional subject. Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. So they are already encouraged, and that is why they have taken up this particular subject. So I don't think I can further tell them that why they have to take up KTPI, because it is already, they already know about it, and I'm sure they have got the inspiration from their seniors. If any of those, any student who is there could let me know that what actually inspired her or him to take up this subject, that would give me an idea that how do students take up this?
Yeah. Kindly, Anju ma'am, please keep your muted. Any student would like to come and speak? What motivated them to take up KTPI as a subject? Quickly, briefly, you can tell. What is their expect? Yes.
Navika is here, ma'am, to speak.
Yeah. Introduce yourself, Namika, and then speak.
Hariom, I'm Bhavika from 11th grade. The main reason I think all of us took KTPI, the first reason is it it is very interesting to know about these things, because most of us have not been very familiar with the Indian systems, and how everything goes on in the how everything went on in the old Indian system. So that is one reason most of us have taken, because of our interest and because of our curiosity to know more about our systems and inspire other people.
Thank you. Thank you. We have Arya Gurukul. Anybody would like to speak? Veena ma'am, can somebody speak? Why Arya Gurukul? Also, a lot of children take up KTPI as a subject.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
the main reason for taking KTPI was, firstly, the subject was new to me, and when I researched about it, so going through the index of the chapter, so it made me felt like we are studying so many Indian ancient chapters, and now we are also getting a particular subject from it, apart from SST. And also our school was offering us to take KTPI as a subject, so why not to study it, and why not to go through deep inside. So that's what.
Yes.
So I think they have all been inspired to know themselves and their country. And that is how most of these children take up this subject. So that is great thing. Now we also need to deliberate on how do we bring in more students to understand this and take up this subject. This Dr. Shanti, we have been deliberating it over the past 1 year.
Absolutely.
And I have to check the records to see whether new schools have joined. Otherwise, it
Yes,
is
ma'am.
generally what I find is most of the Chinmaya mission schools, Amrita Vidyalaya, they have been taking up. But what about the others? They also need to understand the importance of this subject and they take it up. And yes, from the subject committee members, we will of course have another meeting to find out what do we do. We had decided once that we can have an online, maybe through YouTube channel, using our YouTube channel, we can have it. Let us decide on that. But here for students, I have only I just I wanted to share one of the sayings of Mahatma Gandhi, which I thought that is very relevant in how we study this particular subject. So there, Mahatma Gandhi ji says that I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the culture of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet by any of them. So this, I think, is the basic thing that we would like our students to believe in, that keep your mind open, learn everything, know about your country, know about others as well, but don't be blown off by something that is foreign, because your own tradition, your own culture is what makes you strong. So with these few words, let us open this session. Dr. Vinayachandra, we'll all listen to you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Arunima ma'am. That was very rightly said. Knowing our culture, it's an opportunity. It is a very great opportunity for us, and I really would like to know which other schools are doing it, so that we can connect with them. We can have discussions. We can have more activities using the forum where children are participating. We can have debates and talks by children also, is what we have in plans to do it. I'm sure we'll have a wonderful time sharing the experiences of children. And with Arunima ma'am's guidance, CBSE has made the subject more, flexible now. I'm sure you're all aware about it, the kind of changes that the CBSE has brought about it. I probably will share with you at the end of the talk today. And it is very, very important for you to know how the curriculum has been redefined a little bit. Some are only for portfolios. Some topics are only will be assessed in the exam. Portfolios, when you are doing, you will get an opportunity to do more research on such things. You really will get to learn more about it when you're working on the portfolios and the projects. So with these few words, I would now like to hand over the platform to Sri Vinayachandra ji. Dr. Vinayachandra ji is a renowned speaker, and when I was looking for people, and people said he is the right person to handle this topic on the Indian philosophical systems. and I'm sure you'll have an exciting time with them. Please make a note of it. And the very important thing is, at the end, at least 10 minutes, you must have a lot of questions. We want children to ask questions. Please note it down in your pad. You will not get an opportunity to interact with the scholars like this. Take the best out of it. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Namaste. At the outset, my gratitude to Shanti ma'am for this invitation and allowing me to connect with the students from across the country. And I also would like to express my thanks to Arunima ma'am for putting it very succinctly as to what is the message, what is the relevance of everything that we are doing through these series of courses, programs, especially the KTPI program. That is to ensure that our roots are firm, our feet is firmly placed on the ground, we are well rooted as we ascend towards the newer skies and horizons, we are not out of ground. So I think that is the right message which Arunima ma'am has put it forth already. So continuing that particular approach, let's look into one of the important contributions of Indic tradition to the world thought. So this is not just about India or Indian tradition or Indic philosophical systems. It is also one of the richest, varied, diverse, enriching contributions that India has made to the world thought tradition. So that will be the focus of our discussion today. I would have preferred a more interactive session. At any point of time, if someone feels you need to ask a question, please feel free. I'm sure your teachers would facilitate that from wherever you are. We can also have some question and answers at the end, but in between, if you feel there's something important that you need to ask, please feel free. But before I begin, I really want to congratulate you all, because this is that decision that you have made, as some of you just shared a short while ago, that you were curious to know more, you were curious to know about the India of the past. I think this is something that is very important and essential. Unless we know our past, unless we know where we have come from, it would be difficult for us to figure out where we need to go from here, right? All our development is based on our starting point. If you forget your coordinates, it's very difficult to find out how do you go to the next place. What does the GPS do? GPS is exactly that thing which will give you the coordinates where you are. And where you are currently is determined by where you have come from, right? So that's precisely the reason why you should invest yourself to know about your past, about your tradition, about your heritage, not because of its antique value, not because something was great, something was good in the past. No, it also has a lot of relevant things for the contemporary times. We are facing certain challenges, we are facing certain problems, certain issues, because we have not fully grasped the wisdom from the past. I mean, just to give you one example, one of the biggest questions the world faces today, or perhaps two, if I can say that, is concerns about health, concerns about sustainability, right? I don't know if there are bigger or larger problems than these two, especially in the post-COVID world, the kind of situations that we are facing, whether it is physical health or mental health. Of course, our modern medicine system has progressed well. It is coming up with solutions to the challenges, but yet, how healthy are we as a society? Is the health increasing or the health decreasing? If I ask you this question, what does more number of hospitals mean to you? What does it mean? Does it mean a good health system, or does it mean that there are more number of people who are unhealthy and who require treatments? What is it? Right? Definitely, if you need more hospitals, more clinics, more doctors, then it also means that there are more people who are unhealthy, right? So,
may I request the children to use the chat box if Sarah is asking some question? Please give the chat box a reply.
yeah.
At least somebody should be sitting with the keyboard and doing it. Otherwise, it probably he would like to know when he's talking. Interaction will be better. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. So, when you think about health, you just need to look at the past of the India with the best systems that he had created, especially, I'm not speaking about diseases. Of course, diseases were also treated. I'm not speaking about surgery, though there were incidents of surgical tradition in the past. I'm speaking about how do you lead a healthy life? I think the kind of investment that has gone in the Indian tradition, how do you naturally keep yourself fit and healthy? I think India has so much to offer. Indian health systems, specifically Ayurveda, Siddha, they have a lot of inputs to the world. If the world has to be made healthy today, I think we can't ignore the wisdom of this tradition. Similarly, we speak so much about sustainability because that's the biggest challenge. But how do we deal with it? How do we think that only technology answers all our problems? A lot of us in the modern times think so, that oh, if technology is there, if with the emergence of newer technologies, we will be able to solve all the issues. No, that again would be a very wrong idea. Which for that also we need to look at the past, how the whole ecosystem sustained and what kind of considerations human being had for the nature, for the animals, for fellow human beings. Is there something that we can learn from that past and make our lives better today? How can we make the life sustainable today? Because this is the biggest challenge, the crisis that we are facing. So what I meant to say in summary is, when we look into our tradition, when we look back into our past, when we look into our heritage, we are not necessarily doing so to understand only our past. While that is important, we are also doing it because there are worthy lessons. There is wisdom that can make our lives better today in contemporary society. Or if I need to give you one more example and then conclude this part, within health, the mental health is a huge crisis today. You might be looking at people, the kind of statistics that we see today with the number of depressed people, depression, anxiety, stress, these are all the challenges of our modern times, right? And what kind of tools do we have to handle them? If I go to modern medicine, perhaps I might be asked to take some medication, again, which has huge challenges that follow. But if you look back into our own tradition, the practices that we have to keep not just the body, but the body, breath, and mind connection, the entire discipline of yoga and allied subjects, they're precisely there to empower us at the psychological and mental levels and to equip us to handle these kind of stressors, anxieties in a much efficient level, so that we are not vulnerable to the challenges that we generally face, right? So in that way, we have a lot of wisdom, practices, techniques, technologies that are highly relevant to our contemporary times. And that is the precise reason why there are courses like KTPI, Knowledge, Tradition, and Practices of India, so that you have an overview of all that wealth that is available to you at your command. So that you know, sitting on the treasure's house, you know what treasures are available at your disposal and you use them efficiently in the times that you require them. So in this context, we would be looking into a specific section of your textbook, that is the Indian philosophical systems, right? Is this fine? Any questions at this point? Anyone feels like asking something? You may raise your hands or you can type there. If it's fine, then we will proceed. Okay. Let me share my screen. Hope my screen is visible. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So we need to understand, perhaps you'd already be familiar with some discussions or some lessons that you might have already had read, is that the Indian tradition dates back to quite historical times, right? There have been various times through which this whole thought process has developed. If we have arrived today in the 21st century, we are not just 1,000 years old civilization, not just 2,000 years old generation. If I may ask you this question, how ancient is American civilization? How old is it?
You can unmute and speak.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to unmute and speak?
You can speak or you can type, whichever way you are comfortable. Yeah, how old is it? Okay, I'm sure most of you know this. If you trace back the American history to the modern history of America, or whatever we understand as America today, I'm not speaking about the original people of that land, but the modern civilization that we speak about America today, it's hardly 300 to 400 years old, nothing more. If I have to speak about European civilization, I'll trace it to the Roman times or a little before the pre-Roman times, which is maximum around 2000, 2500 years old, right? But if I have to speak about India, then I can easily go to around 5,000 years ago. It's not at all difficult. There are accepted understandings about the Indian civilization as to how old it is, what is the antiquity. Though there is a lot of debate, the debate is about how far can we push the dates behind. But most of the scholars agree that a lot of things that we discuss in the Indian tradition can easily, or the origins of the Indian tradition can be placed around 3000 BC. So that is around already 5,000 years to this point. But there are new researches that are emerging, which are pushing this date quite further behind. So we will await for all those new research that is going to happen. But even if we consider around 3000 BC, there's already a lot, right? So just look at this, have this timeline into your mind so that you know which period we are speaking about. What I call as Vedic period is up to 1000 BC. That is, we don't know when it is a starting point. It could be from 3000 to 1000 according to modern scholars. But we, within the Indian community and a lot of scholars within the tradition, we have ample reasons to believe, of course, with also science validating it today through different fields and domains, that it goes to the, at least the latest dates are around 6000, 7000 BC, from the time when Saraswati river has dried up, right? So there is a huge history which we don't know, we are yet to know, but we will keep those discussions aside. But up to 1000 years BC, we consider that as the Vedic period, okay? The initial Vedic period. In the, from 1000 to 500 BC, I can roughly call it as the Upanishadic period, okay? Where you might have heard about the Upanishads, whether it is Ishavasya Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, many of these Upanishads There are 10 important Upanishads, but there are many more such Upanishads which might have been composed during this time. Again, there is a lot of discussion. Okay. But after that, we come to say from around 500 BC up to 500 AD, nearly that 1,000 years, long 1,000 years, we can roughly call it as the period of classical philosophy. What happened during this period is something interesting to note. In the Vedic period, in the Upanishadic period, people were more spontaneous in their understanding. They were experiential. If someone was speaking about Indra, just I'm giving you an example. Indra was not a distant god for them. Indra was something, a power that they could easily experience and feel. They had that spontaneous connect, whether it was with the deities, whether it was with the forces of nature, whether it was what they called as the higher forces. All that they had a very intuitive connect. Even with nature, if we look at the literature, man is or human being very easily has connected with all things around him or her. That was the area of, or that was the phase of spontaneous experience and connect, what we see in the Vedic period and the post-Vedic period or the Upanishadic period. But around this time, there is a transition that we see that's happening. Experience comes down to some extent. Now, the human being is more of a cognitive animal in the sense that there are a lot of questions that come to his mind. See, questions come to you when you don't have the experience. I'm not saying it is good or bad. I'm just trying to understand the phenomenon. Like when you're completely experientially convinced about something, you won't ask questions. When there is some sort of intuitive grasping, but you're not fully aware, you have not experienced it. It's only when that's the time when you start asking questions. And this is the period when we see there is a lot of thinking, reasoning that goes on in this period. And reasoning is possible only when you have questions. When you start to become curious, when you start to explore it further, when you want to know more and more about it, then you start asking questions. In response to those questions, you try to seek answers. And in seeking answers, you want to distinguish between what is the right answer, what is the not so right answer, what is valid response, what is not so valid response. So all this kind of mental exercise starts. And that is why we call this as the period of reasoning or rational approach. Again, something so beautiful in the Indian tradition. We say that in order to understand something, we need three-dimensional approach. The first one, the tradition says, is Shruti. Shruti is either through listening or through the words of scriptures or through the words of enlightened beings or through the words of scientists, whatever. Someone who has had a deeper experience. You listen to them. This is one approach and this is one path. But is it complete? No. While you have heard about it, while you have listened to it, then comes the second important phase where you need to rationally understand it. You need to think about it. Okay? You need to invest yourself as to question what the teacher has said, what the authority has said, what the text has said, and how well it suits to my experience or not. Right? This is the second path or the approach that is called as yukti, that is either reasoning or rational approach to understand. First one is through listening, second is through reasoning, and third finally comes after continued listening, continued reasoning, then it becomes your deeper experience. then your understanding is complete. Otherwise, if you don't experience something, then your understanding is incomplete. But all the three approaches are required. It starts with Shruti, then follows up with Yukti, that is reasoning, and finally culminates in experience. And historically speaking, this was the phase period where within the Indian tradition, a lot of reasoning took place. A lot of questions, asking questions took place. If you want to compare it with the Western tradition, what would you call this period as, or when do you identify that this particular phenomenon took place in the Western philosophy or the Western tradition? You would have already studied in your history textbooks. Okay, there is a particular period in the Western tradition which they consider to be the most important period, after which a lot of knowledge expansion took place. What period is it called? Any idea? You'd have studied about... Sorry, please. No, there was some echo.
Echo, why don't you write it in the chat box so that we can see?
Yes, ma'am, it is already written. Renaissance, ma'am, the period of Europe.
Exactly. The period of Renaissance, the period of Enlightenment, it was that period in the Western tradition where there were so many thinkers, philosophers who came. Till that point, people had just accepted what the church said or something said. But here, then people started to ask questions, right? The age of reason, roughly around 16th century or from 15th century onwards to 17th century. For that nearly 2 or 3 centuries, you can see a lot of new energy that has come into the human mind and thinking capabilities. That is what we call as the age of reason or the period of Renaissance or enlightenment in the Western tradition. Similarly, the part that is comparable is asking a lot of questions. But we don't call this as a period of enlightenment because we actually call the previous period as the period of enlightenment, but that's a different discussion. But here was the time when people started to ask questions more and more. And in response to that, those series of questions, we see emergence of a lot of philosophical systems. Okay. And this is the beauty of the Indian thought. There is no one answer to any question. There is no one way of doing things, right? If my purpose is to reach the top of the hill and I'm at the bottom of the hill, tell me how many paths are there? I'm at the bottom. My purpose is to reach the top. Is there only one path? No. There could be as many paths as there are points on the circumference of the foot of the hill, right? I can start from anywhere. Maybe some paths are easy. Maybe some paths are fast. Maybe some paths are long, but they are not so difficult. The shortest distance could be the most difficult terrain that I have to climb. Yes or no? But there could be as many paths as possible. This is something very beautiful about Eastern traditions in general, and especially the Indian tradition, which we don't see on the other part of the world. The other part of the world usually comes with one solution, one size fits all, one way of doing things, one way of approaching, one God. Okay, these are some of the approaches that we see in the other parts of the world. Whereas in the Eastern tradition, whether it is in Japan, whether it is in China, whether in other Southeast countries, in all these places, we see a completely different approach. It's not just about one way of doing things, but multiple ways of doing things. And you have it very clearly documented in the Indian tradition that the question might be one, but there could be multiple ways of understanding and exploring it further. Therefore, we see in response to the questions, what were the questions? Some of the questions we see in the Vedas themselves. For example, you start wondering about what is life? What is the meaning of life? Have you had these questions anytime? Any of you? Did I see a hand go up there? Has anyone wondered? I'm sure when you have had a bad day, when you have got some scolding from your teachers, you might have wondered, what am I doing here? Right? But I also assume that you might be really good students and you might not have got such scoldings. But nevertheless, there are possible times when you are going through a difficult phase, rough patches of life, which you may not have seen much, yet ask those questions. What am I doing? Why am I here? What does this all mean? Right? As you grow older and older, some of these questions become truly important. Perhaps at this point, what your questions might be, what do I do when I go home? How do I write my exam? How do I get better marks? How do I get into a good university? Right? How do I get into engineering or medicine or whatever? These might be some of your questions at the moment, but as you grow, as you mature, as you start reflecting on your life and growth, there will be real questions. What is this all about? Just to nudge you to think further, not to disturb you or bother you, but I just want you to think if you have had a similar experience. If someone in the family, someone near and dear, had passed away, not when you were a kid, but when you could understand things better, when you're grown up to that extent and you can feel the loss, you'd really start questioning, what does this mean? This person was here till this point, and from this point onwards, this person is no more with me. You'd recall all the experiences you have had with that person. You feel for that loss. Then, knowingly or unknowingly, you also start asking this question, what does this mean? What does this person mean? What does this life mean? So some of these questions will start to occupy your mental space as you grow further and further. And these were the very questions that the rishis asked at that time. These would be the questions even after 100 years we will be asking. You might be aware, you might be familiar with AI coming into our life so much. In just last 6 to 8 months, ChatGPT has become so popular. It can do so much of work for all of you. I don't know whether you are allowed to use it for your homeworks or your assignments, essays, which you are not supposed to do, but that's a different story. But imagine a period where a lot of your routine work is taken over by AI and you are left with a lot of time. What do? Naturally, you enter into a state of thinking, enter into a state of creative work, enter into a state of reflection. And when you enter into a state of reflection, these would be the questions that you ask more and more. And this is the period where we see when our sages, our ancestors have been very empathetically asking these questions and asking not just for the sake of some curiosity, but relentlessly pursuing it till they find the answers. Okay. Some of the other questions also, if you look around, as kids, life seems to be very beautiful. Life seems to be simple. But as you grow, you also see there is a lot of pain and suffering in life. As I gave you an example, loss of a person, loss of anything causes a lot of pain. Human relationships can bring pain. Many things, our expectations can bring us pain and suffering. So there is a lot of pain and suffering in the entire life. One of the pertinent questions you can see during the philosophical period is how do we alleviate these sufferings of life? It is in that context, they have also identified 3 kinds of pains. You might have read it. One is Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, and Adhidaivika. The tapa, you might be familiar with the general usage, in many Indian languages, tapatraya. Tapatraya. Traya means 3. Tapa is the kind of suffering. So there are largely all our sufferings can be classified into 3 categories. Tapatraya, Adhibhautika, the pain and suffering that comes to us from the physical causes and reasons. Say you're walking out of the classroom, you hit the chair there and your leg becomes swollen. That is a physical pain caused by a physical source. That is Adhibhautika. Second, all of a sudden, without any reason, you feel happy or you feel a little low. It was not that someone humiliated you, someone scolded you. No, you don't even know the reason. This is called as Adhidaivika, which is external but not known. This is Adhidaivika. Third one, Adhyatmika. When you are more focused, when you are self-centered, then there is a sort of a happiness or a joy that you feel, or internally there is something that is unexplainable, or there is no reason, there is no external cause, but inside you are feeling a pain or joy, then that is Adhyatmika. So these are the 3 broad categories of joy and pain that we experience. Adhi Bhautika, Adhi Daivika, and Adhyatmika. So one of the pertinent questions a lot of these philosophical systems ask is, how do we get rid of the pain that comes from these 3 causes? Is it not an important question? Does it not bother us even today that how do I overcome the agony that I face? How do I help humanity overcome the suffering it is facing? A lot of our technological solutions today have come because of these questions, right? Yes or no? When people come up with a startup idea, what do they base it on? They are trying to address a particular strong issue that bothers you, either a small section of population or the larger population. Similarly, our sages are also asking these questions. How do we help humanity overcome these kinds of sufferings? And in response to all these, we see a series of schools, distinct schools from one another coming in this period. But if I have to quickly summarize what also happened in this phase, yeah, I see a hand going up.
Ayom sir, sorry for disturbing, but many like me have a doubt that what is the point of living and keep on achieving things when we know for sure that we are going to die? How will anything that we ever did or will ever do or achieve will matter when we are in our deathbed? What does Indian philosophical system and your stance is on this topic? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you have seen this a meme that is often shared on the social media, where these 2 characters, they're sitting, it's one human being and a dog. I think it's a Snoopy or someone. This boy is sad and is telling, oh, one day we are going to die, Snoopy. To which the Snoopy is, yeah, that is one day, but all the other days we are alive. Right? So that is going to come at some point of time. That is a certain reality of life. And any civilization which has reflected on death, that becomes a mature society. In fact, that is why the Indian tradition is so mature compared to the other traditions. And there are also subtle differences. See, in the Indian tradition, we don't believe that life ends with death. life is just one pause, a brief pause before the next continues. Whereas the modern understanding, no, you only live once. Therefore, whatever you want to do, you do it in this life. Or whatever you want to do all the masti now. This is a different approach which is not aligned to the Indic thinking. Indic thinking is life goes on. Birth is one important point. Death is one important point. And there are experiences beyond death. There is life beyond death. In fact, this is the very question and answer that gets discussed in the entire Bhagavad Gita. If you're familiar with the first chapter, Krishna is fully depressed. If you consider life, that is something that is going to end with death. And even there one could be positive, but as you rightly pointed out, one can easily feel the worthlessness of pursuing a good life. But if you see there, Arjuna gets into a similar position, and that's where the whole of Krishna's response emerges there, saying, no, life is much larger and beyond than death. You need not be afraid of death. Death is just one short pause. That's the whole gist of second chapter of the Gita. Okay, but he says, even if you forget this for a moment, but if you have to just take life, then even then you have to do the things that you are supposed to do, because you need to create meaning for yourself. In 60 years, 70 years, 80 years that I'm alive, I don't know forget what is going to happen after death. Don't even think about rebirth. All those things, forget it for a moment. But even in this 80 years of life, which is quite a long period, can I bring value, meaning, beauty to my life and people around me? I think this itself is a worthy goal to pursue. There will be no reason for anxiety. There will be no reason for concern. There will be no reason for depression. If you just see how beautiful the life is and how can I bring value to my life and also to my surroundings. I think this will bring in a lot of purpose. And the moment there is purpose in life, the way you look at life changes. Again, this is a long question. I'm cutting it short. So coming back to our discussion here, this was a period, as I already said, where there were a lot of questions. And not only questions, there were also concerned about how do we know certain things. Say you're all sitting in a classroom and I just say that it's raining outside. What would you do? Would you simply accept it? No. Either you try to see, you see through the window or listen to the sound, or there should be some ways of knowing it. Okay. So for everything, what is valid ways of knowing it? Okay. Then there was also concern, how do I define something very clearly? Unless I define something clearly, I won't be able to understand it. That's where a lot of technical terms also emerged in this period. And since there were multiple schools, I wanted to, if I have to argue with the other school, then I had to precisely summarize what they are saying. A lot of mistakes that we do in our conversation today is completely misread the other. Okay. But I can have a good conversation only when I understand what the other person is saying and say how your argument is not so good enough, or where are the challenges in your argument and why my argument is better. So summarizing the other and putting forth my thought, and to bring clarity into the overall understanding. This seems to be the important concerns of this period. And with these concerns in mind, we see the emergence of what we call as darshana. We loosely translate it to the English word philosophy, but there is some important difference between the word philosophy in the Western context and darshana in the Indian context. At least may not be with its origins, but the way it is understood. In the West, philosophy is curiosity of mind. It is a deep desire to understand. It does not imply experience. Whereas, look at the word darshana, as most of you would be familiar with the word darshana, is the act of seeing, right? We say, in our colloquial languages, for those who are familiar in Kannada, Devara darshana, God's darshan, right? Gurugala darshana, darshan of the Guru. What does it mean? Having a direct experience. It starts with your cognitive perception, but ends or culminates with a deeper experience. This whole thing is called as darshana. So it's not just curiosity, it's not just love for knowledge, philosophia, what it means in the Western context. Philos means love, Sophia is knowledge, right? So it's love, it's not just love for knowledge, but it is deep desire for direct experience. That is darshana. So in the Indian philosophy, when we say Indian philosophy, it will be largely speaking about 6 orthodox philosophical systems and 3 heterodox or unorthodox systems. So combinedly, it is 9 philosophical systems. Okay, we'll see what are there. And the word darshana comes from the Sanskrit root drish, which means to see. So that is the direct vision, seeing it, and it also means the instruments through which I see. So therefore, means of knowledge and knowing both are important in the context of darshana. It's not just one. It's not just the instrument of seeing. It is not just the act of seeing, but both. So what are these schools? I said that there were 9. So on one side, what we call as orthodox, which is not a very good word, because by orthodox, we mean something negative, small, limited. So here, don't take the word orthodox and heterodox in that context. Just call them as Vaidika Darshana and Avaidika Darshana. I'll explain why. Okay, on one side, you have 6 philosophical systems: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purvamimamsa, and Vedanta. On the other side, you have Charvaka, Jaina, and Bauddha. They all emerged at different phases of life. We don't know, but at this period, we see them all competing with each other, having very well thought through conversations with each other, each putting forth arguments how their understanding is better than the other school. A very healthy conversation happening during this period. So there are 9 schools which we need to briefly look into. Okay. So on what basis do I make this classification? It's very simple. Okay. The systems which accept the authority of the Vedas. Okay. Whatever schools which say, okay, my existence or my understanding, my insights follow the understandings of the Vedas, then they are called as orthodox, or the better way of saying is Vaidika Darshana or Astika Darshana. Okay. They believe in the authority of the Vedas. And there are other 3 schools which say, no, my existence is independent of the Vedic teaching. I'm not so concerned about that. It's not that I'm opposed to Vedas. No, that is not the point. I don't have to depend on the Vedas to prove my existence. And therefore, in that tradition, we have 3 schools: Charvaka, Jaina, and Bauddha. So this is one major basis for classification, but this is not the only basis. Okay. So if I have to put it largely, then you have the Indian philosophical systems, the Astika schools and Nastika schools. And within the Astika schools, you have 2 sections which are largely dependent on the Vedas, that is Mimamsa and Vedanta. The other 4 schools, they draw inspiration from the Vedas, but they are not so fully dependent on expanding the understanding of the Vedas, that is Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga. This is the larger classification. Okay. Now, going further, this is something I want you to understand. Basis, whether you accept Vedas or not, we saw the classification, but I said that is not the only basis. There could be other basis also. For example, acceptance of a god or supreme power. So if a philosophical system accepts God, then it can be called as Astika Darshana. If it does not accept God, then it can be called as Nastika. In that case, I want you to understand from this system, see, for example, Sankhya does not believe in God. It does not speak anything about God. Then Sankhya will also move to the right side, to the other column. Okay, depending on what my basis of classification, this is a fluid categorization. And there is also one more, acceptance of soul as the core self beneath the body. So if I accept this, that there is a self which is evolving, then except for Charvaka, all the systems come on the other side, including Jaina and Bauddha. Because even in the Jaina tradition, even in the Bauddha tradition, there is self. Whether it is permanent, non-permanent, it is a different discussion, but they all come to the other side. And similarly, if I accept one more thing, acceptance of the need for conscious and ethical living to overcome bondage, suffering, and death, then except for Charvaka, again, all these schools will be on one side. Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, Purvamamsa, Vedanta, Jaina, and Bauddha, they all accept self, and they all accept that there is a lot of suffering in this life. We need to lead a good conscious life to overcome the suffering. So this is accepted by all except Charvaka. Then if I say Astika Darshana basis this categorization, then all the 8 systems will be on one side, only Charvaka will be on the other side. So what I'm trying to say is, the classification is dependent on 2 or 3 different factors, but generally accepted main factor is whether they accept the authority of the Vedas or not. If they accept the authority, then they're called as Astika schools. If they don't accept, then they're called as Nastika schools. Okay, then I'll just quickly going to summarize and help you to understand what a darshana will contain. If you understand this structure, then it would be easy for you to remember each one of the school and also understand and appreciate the difference between one school and the other. So when I say a darshana, when I say a philosophical systems, there are 3 important components embedded to that. The words might appear to be too technical for you. Don't worry about the words, but I want you to understand the concepts there. First one is ontology. What does this mean? Each philosophical school firmly believes that there is something what it calls as real. Let me give you a few examples and then come back. What does physics think? Don't say about belief here. What does physics say? Physics says that everything that we see can be broken up into smaller units called atoms. Atoms is the ultimate reality, and based on the way the atoms combine, you have different levels of realities emerging, right? Atom is the ultimate reality for physics. So similarly, each and every system understands that there is something what we call as ultimate reality. And each one of the philosophical system we see here, they have a different positions. Let me give you an example from there. For those who might have known or heard or read about the different traditions within Vedanta, I'm sure this is part of your text too, or those who have heard of these names, Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita, you might have come across these terms. May not be so familiar with them, but you might have come across. Let me give you an example there, and so that you can understand and appreciate this part. What does Advaita say? Advaita says that there is only one self behind and beyond everything. I as Vinayachandra, you as XYZ, anyone who might be, it says that there is only one self, not only between two human beings, between human and an animal, between human and an inanimate thing. Behind everything, there is only one self. This is the position of Advaita. That is the ontology of Advaita. Whereas, if I go to the Dvaita school says, yes, of course, behind and beyond everything, there is self, but it classifies there are two different selves. One is the superior self, and the rest are all inferior selves. So there are two realities, two ultimate realities. Or if I go to Vaisheshika school, this you find it very interesting. If I go to Vaisheshika school, Vaisheshika says, if I break everything to the minutest reality, then I come across something so important. What, see the word it uses, it is anu or kana. What is translated in English as atom. How we define, the modern definition is different and the ancient definition is different. Nevertheless, the Vaisheshika school says, if I break up everything into its smallest unit, then it is anu or kana, which is the center of reality. So that is the ontology of that particular school. What is the ultimate reality? What do I consider real is my ontology. Okay. Again, I want to impress upon you that you might not know the word ontology, but it is a concept that you would be familiar with in different contexts. See, some of you might take your homeworks very seriously. For your ontologies, homework is extremely important. Some of you, I hope not many of you there, some of you might not take it so seriously. In your ontology, that is not so important. Some of you might consider playing as extremely essential. If you don't play for half an hour or 1 hour every day, you don't like to complete your day. In your ontology, playing is extremely essential. Therefore, you prioritize everything around it. Some of you may not be so interested in playing. Therefore, in your ontology, that may not be so important. You get it? Ontology is what you consider real, what you consider important, what you would like to prioritize. That is your ontology. The second thing comes. Fine, I understand what I understand, but how do I know it? How do I understand what I understand? What are my means of knowledge? So that is epistemology. Say by now, whether you're in 11th or 12th, you would have already decided that this is the university that I need to join. So that university is your important priority at the moment. That is your ontology. Now the next question is, how did you arrive at it? Either your cousin might have said it, or your teacher might have said it, or you might have read it in a good journal or a magazine. That is your epistemology. How did you know what you know? Whether you believed your cousin or your elder brother or your sister or your teacher or your parent or someone who is good in summarizing these concepts through writing, through articles. You believed them, you accepted them. That becomes your epistemology. How do I know what I know? What I know is ontology. How do I know what I know is epistemology. And third comes, when I know what is my reality, the every effort that I put to experience that reality is my ethics. Now that you have decided this XYZ is the university that you want to join, if you have decided that and then you spend all your time on the mobile phones, on gaming, on something else, then that becomes completely unethical. So what is ethics there is, now that I have decided this is the university, Now that I have trusted my source of knowledge, now it becomes imperative for me to do everything, align my life in such a way so that I ensure I get the required marks and go to that university. That entire effort that you put to reach towards your ontology, that is ethics. How do you conduct your life? How do you practically live what you believe? That is ethics. So each one of the philosophical systems have these three important concepts. It's only when they have these components, it becomes a full-fledged philosophy. The difference between Indian philosophy and Western philosophy is here to some extent. The first two you can see in the Western, ontology and epistemology. And both they have taken it to their logical ends. There are a lot of detailed questioning, thinking about the first two, ontology and epistemology, but the third seems not so important. Therefore, it is more of an intellectual exercise in the West. Whereas in the Indian context, it is not an intellectual exercise. Though it starts at the intellectual plane, it ends in experience and practical living. One beautiful, simple example from a story that you might know, right? There is an episode in Ramayana where at the end of the entire Ramayana story, when Rama, Sita, Hanuman, they return back to Ayodhya. Rama is so pleased with Hanuman. Therefore, he hands over a mala to Hanuman. Right? What does Hanuman do? He breaks open every bead and sees whether Rama is there. For him, Rama was the ontology. Rama was the only reality. If Rama was not there, then there is nothing has any purpose for Hanuman. So Hanuman wanted to experience Rama in each and every bead. Right? So that is, it's not just loving Rama, but to the extent of going experiencing Rama there. So this is the ethical part, what is we consider in the Indian tradition, the most important thing. And I also like to add, in all the 8 systems of Indian philosophy, leaving out Charvaka, ethics more or less remains the common thing. Therefore, with so many schools, you don't find them killing each other. Whereas this could have never happened in the Western context. You would see one school of thought coming in, eliminating, physically killing and eliminating the earlier school of thoughts. Whereas in the Indian context, all the 9 systems of philosophy coexisted. Right? Because most of them share the last part. All of them believe that there is a soul or a self. There is a way how you can overcome the suffering and you need to lead a good life. This is so important. These 3 components, or if you have this grammar, it's easy for you to understand any schools. So my purpose here is just to give you the basics so that you will be able to understand each one of the schools. Now, going to the epistemology part, because this is their part of your text, I'm just giving you a quick overview of this. When I ask this question, how do I know anything? Largely, these would be the ways, the way I understand anything that I know so far. First one, I'm sure most of you would agree that whatever information I receive from direct perception of 5 sense organs, what I see, what I hear, what I smell, what I touch, I take it inside as valid source of knowledge initially. But is it the only means? Is it the only way I understand? No. A lot of that you are studying in your textbooks, that does not belong to Pratyaksha. You would have studied about atomic reaction. Has anyone experienced atomic reaction? Have anyone of you seen that? No. You would never see it in your life. Yet you accept it as a valid means of knowledge. How? That's where you have The fourth one, Shabda or verbal testimony. When you receive information from valid sources, a scientist says so, a well-read teacher says so, knowledgeable parent says so, then also you accept it. All your textbooks are nothing but your Shabda Pramana. You understand it because it has come from a certain authority. That is Shabda. Okay. There is also something called as Anumana. Anumana is inference. For example, you don't perceive something directly, but you see some other result. Looking at the result, you try to infer. For example, there are two classrooms where you are sitting and the next classroom, and there are no teachers in both the classrooms. There is a lot of noise happening, and suddenly in one classroom, there is no sound. There is no noise at all. Then what do you understand in this situation? You understand that principal has come into the corridor. You have not seen the principal there. You have not seen them, but because there is no noise coming from the next classroom, you infer that either a principal or a teacher has come into that corridor, and immediately your classroom follows. Therefore, you also become silent, right? So this is Anumana. You infer. You have not directly perceived, but you are inferring something. Third one is Upamana. Upamana is through similarity. Okay, you have not seen someone or you have not met that person, but someone says, you see this person, you see this boy Ramesh, he has a twin brother Girish. If you look at Ramesh, Girish is actually or absolutely similar to Ramesh. So next time when you meet Girish, you will immediately recognize him as, he is Girish, though you have not met him so far. Right? That is through similarity, upamana. We understand many things through analogy also. And the last two are slightly complicated. There are a lot of questions around them. I won't bother you with the philosophical questions there, but just to give you some examples and understand. On the classroom, you have a table. And on the table, you usually find the duster placed there, right? When you come there and see, if you don't see the duster, you immediately understand that duster is not there. Now, what are you seeing? Did you see the duster there or did you see the table there? You are perceiving the absence of the duster and immediately realizing that the duster is not there. This is another means of knowledge, what we call as anupalabdhi. And the last one is there. This is also very interesting one, arthapatti or implication, which is an extension of anumana. Say you have a classmate who says he is fasting. It can be he or she, okay? That they are fasting and they don't bring any lunch box or food to the classroom. But day by day, their weight is increasing. They're becoming fat. Then what do you understand? You easily understand that this fellow, he's just making a story. He's not eating in front of us, but having something or loading himself or herself well during the evenings or late night when no one else is seeing. Did you see him or her eat? No, you have not seen them eating, but you have seen the implication, and by implication, you are inferring what might have happened. That is arthapatti. So, these are the larger ways through which we understand and make sense of things that are happening around us. In all these philosophical systems, they have gone and questioned each one of them. They have questioned like, when does pratyaksha become valid? When is it, when does it become invalid? To what extent can I accept shabda? To what extent can I not accept shabda? Where is upamana valid? Is arthapati valid everywhere? Is it an independent means of knowledge, or is it just part of inference? So they have got into these very detailed, hair-splitting questions and understood each one of them and their validity or limitations. Okay. So this is just to give you an overview. And now coming back to the earlier question. So we had these classification, Astika Darshana and Nastika Darshana. And even in Astika Darshana, we can see the philosophical systems fall into groups. Nyaya and Vaisheshika, they share a lot. Sankhya and Yoga, they share a lot. Purvamamsa and Vedanta, also called as Uttaramimamsa, they share a lot. Therefore, they are called as twin philosophical systems. Okay. So these are the varied philosophical systems that are there. And all or most of them are written in what we call as sutra literature. Sutras are short statements, very thoughtfully composed. One of the most important characteristics of sutra literature is to make it as small as possible. Okay. This is something that is appreciated even in our modern computational linguistics or language. This is a principle that is highly respected. How briefly can I state something without making long statements? And while making it a short statement, I should be careful, or I should ensure that it is not ambiguous. It is pregnant with meaning. It has universal application. It is factual and does not consist error. This is very difficult. And yet, a lot of our philosophical systems are written in this particular style, sutra style. Let me just give you one example of how brief can be. In the Vyakarana tradition, in the grammar tradition, you might have heard that Panini has written the sutras, or what is called as Ashtadhyayi Panini Sutras. There are about nearly 4,000, precisely 3,984 sutras. The last sutra is just 2 syllables. Just only these two sounds. But it has a lot of implications for nearly 300, 400 sutras which go behind. So that, I think, just to understand and appreciate the way sutras have been written would be a great intellectual exercise for all of us. And I'm sure, given your age and your cognitive abilities, you will be able to appreciate them. And a lot of the texts have been written in this particular style. Only that we are not able to get sutra literature in some of the traditions. For example, in Sankhya, we don't have the sutra, the original sutra that is lost. Okay, we have Nyaya Sutra, we have Vaisheshika Sutra, we have Sankhya Sutra, we have Yoga Sutra, we have Purvamamsa Sutra and Vedanta Sutra. Sutras are available in all the 5, but not in Sankhya. And Jaina and Bauddha, they are written in different styles. Charvaka has been composed, like the original texts are lost. Only secondary texts, tertiary texts are available to us. Okay. So I don't know if I have time to go into detail into each one of them, considering it's already 11:23. But to briefly summarize, Nyaya, we attribute it to sage Gautama. And one of the core approaches or understandings of Nyaya is, how do I know what I know? It focuses largely on the epistemology to refine my thinking process, thought process, and knowledge process. In fact, it refines, it gives the epistemology so well that most of the other systems usually use the logic and approach of Nyaya. And between Nyaya and Vaisheshika, Vaisheshika fully accepts Nyaya's epistemology and Nyaya fully accepts Vaisheshika's ontology. and therefore they have a shared ethics. So Vaisheshika is founded by sage Kanada. Kanada itself means one who focuses on Kana or atom. So if you have to trace the origins of atomic theory in the Indian context, this is where I go to the Vaisheshika tradition. They say that the entire world can be broken up into small elements called as Kana or Anu. It's an allied system of Nyaya. And then I move on to Purva Mimamsa, that is the school which focuses largely on how do I understand the Vedic statements. Again, here the sutras are written by Jaimini and they are called as Purva Mimamsa Sutra or Jaimini Sutra. This text is also available to us. Largely it says, especially in the context of rituals, how do I understand the statements? How do I use the Veda mantras in the rituals? The Veda mantras are composed in a particular style. So how do I understand the gist or summary of that particular passage? So this is the whole approach of Purvamamsa. Vedanta focuses more on the Upanishadic teaching. It says, ultimately, there is only Brahman that is real. Okay? Everything else is an expression and expansion of Brahman. So the core teaching of the Vedas and the Upanishad is about one true reality, one principle, that is Brahma. So that's why it is called as Brahma Sutra, composed or written by sage Vedavyasa. There are a lot of commentaries, but the most important commentary that we come across, a detailed commentary, is from Sri Shankaracharya, and that is called as Brahma Sutra Bhashya. So that gives the path towards Advaita Vedanta, but there are other schools also, Dvaita Vedanta and Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta. Ramanujacharya has written a commentary on the same Brahma Sutras, and he has brought it out in a Vishishta Advaita tradition. And Madhvacharya has written a commentary on the Brahma Sutras, where he brings about the Dvaita understanding of the Vedanta. Then you have Sankhya school. Sankhya takes a different approach, and it is one of the oldest schools, if I can say so. Sankhya is called as Sankhya because it breaks the whole universe into various elements. There is one Purusha, Prakriti. From Prakriti comes the Mahat. So according to the Sankhya traditions, there are 25 principles or 24 plus 1. You look into the world in terms of numbers. Therefore, the word Sankhya comes from Sankhya, the philosophy of numbers. Okay, this is the larger classification, but you don't have to worry about them. But I just want you to understand that there are various elements through which Sankhya looks at the world. That means there are about 25 elements, and therefore it is called as Sankhya, coming from Sankhya, which means numbers. It also means Sankhya because it gives us a very detailed understanding of the whole universe. Samyak khyayate, something that has been explained very well, therefore it is Sankhya. So I have sutras written by Kapila here, but that is not available, that is lost. I have Sankhya Karika, and later texts are available for me.
So there is a question, somebody has
Yeah.
asked a question. Is ethics a part of value theory? Or is it a theory in itself in this context?
No, here what we consider as value theory is slightly different in the modern context. But here, when I'm using the word ethics in a more simple, not in the technical terms, but in the terms of how do I lead a good life? How do I reach my ontology? That is what I mean ethics here. It does not get into the philosophization of what is value, how do I arrive at value, what we consider in the value theory. No, that is not what is, we can't equate that with ethics here. It's a more simplistic understanding. So just in the context, give you an example. Liberation or ethics in the Sankhya context is Purusha, that is the self, He is unknowingly entangled with Prakriti. He has falsely identified himself, and I need to come out of this. This is the ethics of Sankhya and Yoga. The individual should liberate himself. So going further, Yoga shares a lot with Sankhya. It does not get into epistemology. It does not get into ontology. It only says, let me focus on ethics. Let me give you a detailed way how human being can overcome suffering. Therefore, Ashtanga Yoga, you might have heard, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, the eightfold steps. Okay? 5 ethical ways of living, that is Yama, Niyama, positive cultivation of practices, Asana, physical postures, Pranayama, gaining mastery over breath, Dharana, Pratyahara, bringing back the energy of your senses, Dharana, focusing it on one place, Dhyana, meditation, Samadhi, complete absorption. These are various steps that are provided in a detailed manner in the yoga tradition. We attribute the sutras to sage Patanjali. There are a lot of stories about how sage Patanjali came into existence. Again, I'm leaving out. One of the most important texts of the tradition is Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which has about 195 or 196 sutras. So these are largely about the 6 schools of Astika Darshanas. Then you have 2 important, Jaina and Bauddha. Again, the Jaina tradition is one of the oldest traditions. We know a lot about Vardhamana Mahavira, who is believed to be the 24th Tirthankara belonging to the 6th century BC. But the first one, Rishabhadeva, is one of the oldest. We don't know how many thousands of years I need to push the dates back to reach his time. But there are cross references about Rishabhadeva in different traditions and texts too. So even Jaina tradition focuses more on the liberation aspect or the ethics aspects, what it calls as Gunasthana. And there are about 14 steps through which you move. So first, you need to figure out what is the false vision that you have, false identification that has been made. From that, you need to move towards the right one. And then how do you develop it? So all these, what are the various practices? So it gives you a detailed list. And then similar approach is taken by Buddhism. It does not speak so much about the self, whether it is permanent self or impermanent self. Buddha was so concerned about the suffering of the people. He said, why are you bothered about all these philosophical questions? Please focus on liberating people from the pain that they are facing. For that, you need to understand something, that there is pain, there is a cause for pain, then there is a way to overcome, and there are steps to overcome. This was the focus of his teaching. So this is called as Chatur, the 4 noble truths, that is Dukkha, Dukkha Samudaya, Dukkha Nirodha, and Dukkha Nirodha Marga. And that is where you come across the 8-fold noble path as a part of Dukkha Samudaya Nirodha Marga. So how do you overcome? He says there are 8 noble truths which you have to follow to overcome the suffering. So Samyak Drishti, which is also similar to what you saw, whether in the Yoga tradition or Jaina tradition. Some details might vary from one school to the other. I also have given you the comparison here between the Bauddha Darshana and the Yoga Darshana, right? Yama, Niyama, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi on one side, that is from Yoga tradition. In the Bauddha tradition, you have Samyak Drishti, Samyak Sankalpa, Samyak Vak, that is right speech, Samyak Karmanta, right action, Samyak Jiva, right livelihood, Samyak Vyayama, right effort, Samyak Smriti, right attentiveness, focus or concentration, Samyak Samadhi, right absorption. So these are the most important teachings of Jaina tradition. So with this, we conclude all the 8 systems. I know we couldn't spend much time on the systems per se, but I hope I have given you an overview as to how you can understand them. Just one line and I can conclude. Charvaka takes a completely different position on most of the things. I'll give you examples so that you appreciate it, and with that we can conclude. Okay. So what is Charvaka ontology? Charvaka ontology, it says, bro, don't worry, there is nothing after life. Whatever you are doing in this life, that is the only reality. Your current life, today's life is reality. That is the ontology, the bro language that Charvaka speaks. Okay. And what is its epistemology? It says, I won't believe Shabda. I won't believe any of these pramanas. Anumana is not valid. Upamana is not valid. Shabda is not valid. Anupalabdhi is not, none of them is not valid. Only what is valid for me is Pratyaksha. If I see, I believe. I have never seen people coming back after life. Therefore, I don't believe afterlife. I don't believe in doing karma punya because I don't know what punya I will get and what will happen to me. I only believe what is real to me. That is YONO philosophy. You live only once. Using the credit card. Today, I take all the loan. I'm not worried about how I'm going to repay it back. There is a similar statement in Charvaka Darshana also, which is Rinam Kritva Ghritam Pibet. What does it mean? Even if you want to indulge using a lot of ghee or anything that you want to do, Rinam Kritva, take a lot of loan. Vijay Mallya philosophy. You take a lot of loan, whether you can repay back or not, you run away then. Okay, that is the Charvaka philosophy. Their ontology is only today's moment. The now moment is the only reality. I will not be bothered about tomorrow or yesterday. So therefore, there is no ethics also. And only epistemology, I believe, is only whatever I see, I hear, I listen, I touch, only that is reality. There is nothing else that is real. So this is the, in brief, Charvaka. I have oversimplified it, but in that time, that's what I could do. So thank you so much. If there is time and there are questions, we can spend a few minutes.
Thank you so much. It was, Vinayji, it was absolutely amazing. I mean, it only, I think there's an ocean of knowledge other side, which we have not explored at all. Our education system needs to address it. And fortunate are these children getting exposed to this. I think there's a lot that can be done with whatever knowledge they're getting. I request children to ask questions. It will be, because if you are getting a person of this stature here, please do not miss this opportunity. Put your questions so that you get some clarity. And I'm sure it will reflect in your studies also. Yes, I see a hand from CIRS. I want all the schools, at least one child should get up and ask a question. Please make it. That will motivate us to organize more such sessions. Sure. It was brilliant, Vinayji. I have to say, it was absolutely brilliant. Yes.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Why Vedanta is called as Uttar Mimamsa?
Very good. So it allows me to explain why the earlier one called is Mimamsa and this is Uttara Mimamsa. The word Mimamsa comes from the root Matum Ichha, desire to measure. Matum means to measure. Ichha is desire. So Matum Ichha is Mimamsa. The entire approach of Mimamsa is to understand the Vedas. What is the essential teaching of the Vedas? So it is going to measure the teaching of the Vedas. So what happens there is, in the Purva Mimamsa, the earlier Mimamsa, it focuses more on the ritualistic aspects of the Vedas. Vedas have broadly these two aspects, the ritualistic aspects, the spiritual aspects. The Purva Mimamsa of Jaimini, it focuses on rituals. Therefore, it is called as Purva, the initial, earlier focus. But perhaps even historically, when people started to looking into it more and more, they felt while rituals are important, I can go beyond the rituals also. Not that rituals are insignificant. Let me make this very clear. Rituals have a very important role in our lives. Somehow we are made to believe that, oh, rituals are useless. No, never think of it in those lines. Rituals are extremely important and they are helpful. But one need not be limited to the externals of rituals. There is a meaning behind the ritual. And going to the core of that meaning is the Uttara Mimamsa, the later part. Or even if I have to take the physical classification of the Vedas, you might have read that there are 4 components of the Vedic text: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. Samhitas and Brahmanas, they focus more on external rituals, whereas Aranyaka and Upanishad, they focus more on the internal rituals or the spiritual aspects. So, Brahma Sutras or Uttara Mimamsa focuses on the Upanishads. Therefore, that is Uttara. Whereas the Jaimini Sutras, they focus on the earlier texts, that is Samhita and Brahmana. Therefore, it is called as Purva Mimamsa. Hope this is clear.
Thank you.
Ask.
Yeah. Yeah, Kannur, CV Kannur.
Yes, sir. So the question was, you had told us that a Purusha or an individual must liberate themselves. So is this related to a concept, or it preceded the concept that came later on as the ideology of existentialism by Jean-Paul Sartre and Fyodor Dostoevsky?
Well, what I would say at this point is we should refrain from making direct comparisons. Existentialism has a particular approach. There are some elements that can be comparable to the Vedantic tradition, but the context in which these systems emerged, they differ largely. So I would take a step back and see where they have emerged. What are only those few elements where they can be compared? A direct correspondence is not feasible here.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. CV Pallavur, you want to ask a question, or CARS? I saw CARS hand up again.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about the historic lens. So can you elaborate on the historic lens?
On the historic
Lens.
Okay. Yeah, again, in the interest of time, as I was saying, today, conventional scholars have agreed that the dating of the Upanishadic period is around 1500 BC. And Samhitas seem to be much earlier than them. We don't know the exact timing, but there are some inputs that are coming. For example, if you look at the Rig Veda, there are a lot of reference in more than 500 places. River Saraswati has been mentioned. And the way it has been mentioned, you should see, it says, "Oh, mighty Saraswati, you're flowing, you're flooding, you're flourishing." So these are the kind of references that we come across to the river Saraswati. For a long time, it was believed that this was a mythical river, that there was no actual river at all, because today we don't see Saraswati. So people believed that it was a mythical river, but in last 2 decades, just in last 2 decades, not before that, there are various kinds of, again, unconnected researches that have happened through some what they call it as when they were trying to find oil reserves in the Rajasthan desert region or in the dry lands. They found some patches of water beneath the surface, much beneath the surface. And then they were putting it together, try to see where these points are. They could see that there is some sort of a flow. And it was exactly in these areas where some ancient settlements were found. So then there have been enough evidence to point towards that there was a river which has dried up. And now some researchers are pointing to the fact that this river might have dried up around 5000 or 6000 BC. If I say 6000 BC, that is 8000 years from now. So this river might have dried up during 6000 BC. That means the Vedic people who have referred to this river might have lived during that period or even before that. Again, this is a lot of it is speculation at the moment. We are awaiting a lot of new researches that are happening, but nevertheless, so from 1500 years, starting from that point, 1500 BC, the beginning of the Vedic period can be anywhere between 6000 BC to 1500 BC. So that is the period of the Vedas where you have Samhita emerging, Brahmana emerging, Aranyaka emerging, and the Upanishads emerging. Once the Upanishad period is over, then we see the age of reason, where these philosophical systems emerged, and they also have emerged over a period of 1000 years, from 5th century BC up to 5th century AD or even more. When I'm saying this, these are broad points. It's not exactly at 5th century BC, the Upanishad period stopped and the philosophy started. No, they were happening. So transition period can be called as anywhere between 300 to 500 years when the transition takes place. So from 500 AD up to 1500, we see other schools like Nyaya developing. In fact, from 10th century onwards, Navya Nyaya, a new tradition in Nyaya started. There was a lot of work that is being done around grammar. Some schools become less important, some schools become more important. The Bauddha traditions flourishing in the 4th century up to 7th, 8th century. Post 8th century, we don't find the Buddhist traditions in India. So a lot of dynamics have happened, and it was continued from 12th century onwards. We see Bhakti tradition more active. Philosophical traditions reduced. And from 14th, 15th century, Vedanta more active compared to any other schools. So at different phases, different schools have been more and more active. But I think largely to say, it is the Vedanta school which has gained that kind of supremacy over a period of time. So more and more texts have come in the Vedanta tradition, more and more gurus have come. So it's still a very active living tradition compared to other schools.
Yeah. Pallavur, you wanted Pallavur school? Somebody was getting up? Yes. Speak.
Hariom sir. Hariom sir. I am from Chinmaya Vidyalaya Pallavur. Philosophy, science, technology, astronomy, etc. were well developed in ancient India. Majority of the rulers give patronized and maintained philosophers in their court. Do this have any political implications?
What do you mean by political implications? You're muted.
I think she means about in the political interest, have these people done anything like that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. See, at any point of time, a certain progress is possible only when you have patronage.
Right.
If you don't have patronage, progress is not possible. Why do you think the Western world progressed technologically so much? The Industrial Revolution happened. So many other things happened in the Western world from after 17th century. What do you think is the reason?
They were patronized, I know, supported.
How were they supported? They were supported because of the colonies, because of the rich wealth these countries looted from other parts of the world. There was a sudden inflow of huge wealth, unimaginable wealth into Europe. And when so much of wealth came in, they started to use it in good ways, bad ways. And the good ways that went resulted in the outcome in science and technology. At any point of time, if you look, a lot of knowledge has been possible only when there is some support. Okay? When you have a good scholar, see, a good scientist should not be worried about where the next meal will come from. If he is able to stay, if he or she is able to stay in a lab and continue his or her work, then there will be much more progress that will be made, right? And if for that to happen, someone should support them. It's just like you come up with a proposal and there is a funding agency that supports you, right? So similarly, most of the times we see historically that it is the political patronage which has supported either the existence of a Gurukula or a scholar. But it's not necessary that it's only through political patronage the scholars have emerged. Despite political patronage, the scholars have emerged. And also another thing important in the Indian context is, while the political support was there, a knowledgeable person was kept above the political power, unlike the Western world. If you're familiar with the Ramayana or Mahabharata or any other context, the kings used to go and visit their gurus. It was not the other way around. If you look into the life of Chanakya and Chandragupta, Chanakya was the person who was instrumental to put Chandragupta on the throne. In fact, Chanakya could himself have become the king. He never becomes a king. He puts Chandragupta on the throne. After making him the king, he could have easily become the Pradhana Mantri or the prime minister there. But he doesn't become a minister. He walks out. He makes Amatya Rakshasa the minister and he walks out. If you look into our own South Indian tradition, it was who was the founder of Vijayanagara Empire, which was one of the most flourishing empires. Have you read about them? The Vijayanagara Empire was established by Hakka and Bukka, Harihara and Vijaya, right? How did they establish? It was their guru who showed the way to them. That was Vidyaranya, and Vidyaranya himself was a spiritual sannyasin. Or if you take the life of Shivaji was such a great king. He became such a great king under the guidance of many people, including Samartha Ramdas, who was again a sannyasi. So in India, the power structure is slightly different. The people who have sacrificed, knowledgeable people are on the top, then comes the king, and then the other things. Whereas in the Western world, political power or the religious power is at the top, and then comes everything down. So there is a huge difference. So what you asked, whether there is political implication, yes, in the Western world, what you're saying could be so, it's a reality, and there are historical instances, but not so in the Indian context.
Yeah. Yes. Anybody else? Any other question? Anyone else has any question? Yeah. You can unmute and speak. Anybody having any question? I think there are no more questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Vinay. It was a pleasure having you here. And I think it was a great opportunity for children to listen to you. I think you are a walking, talking encyclopedia yourself. And I personally loved the session. Interesting. It was absolutely interesting and amazing. Thank you so much. We have Veena from Arya Gurukul, Mumbai. She will be delivering the vote of thanks. After vote of thanks, children, I'll take. There's any question from CIRS? Again, one more hand has come up quickly. The last question you can have.
Hariom, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sir, Hariom, sir. So till now, the Indian philosophical systems lived, and as the young generations who need to carry this forward and not let it die. But being in this modern world, it is pretty difficult to promote philosophical systems. So could you give us any suggestions on how we can take this forward or like promote it?
Wonderful question. See, when we say philosophical systems, again, we started off with this question. It's not just about past. What we need to look is, when we study these, what are those thoughts, ideas relevant for my current times? Let me give you an example. See, today in the age of artificial intelligence, ethics is a very big area where there are a lot of questions arising. You might be familiar with this particular situation, which is often cited as an example. Say there is a self-driven car, okay, for which you have given all the detailed algorithms as to how it needs to drive, how it needs to avoid the obstacles, how to avoid accidents and all those things. But say it has come to a situation where if it takes left, it's going to kill 4 people. If it takes right, it's going to kill a mother and a baby. A decision has to be made. You have to write all these algorithms, right? Tesla's self-driven car is a reality today. So there is so much of discussion that is happening in the world of ethics. How do I understand this situation? Whose life is more valuable? Can I take this question of life, whether is it a mathematical count that I need to consider, or is it something else? Like, there are a series of questions. If you start asking with the first question, you will end up with 20-30 questions in this scenario. You need to think through all these aspects to write an algorithm for current times. Then when you're doing these things, can you have the wisdom of your past guide you? What does the traditions think about life? How do I understand? So your algorithms can develop based on the insights and inputs and wisdom from various traditions. You say, if I have to hit between 2 different things, or I mean, there could be various kinds of questions. So for all these things, having as many inputs, I don't want you to sit and write sutras in the tradition. I want you to use that wisdom and address the issues that we face today. And that is the way how you keep the tradition alive. In medical research, in all the research fields, especially when you're doing a good research, you will have something called as a research committee. And within the research committee, you will have at least a couple of people who comes from the ethics background. Say you're doing a medical research. Can you test it on an animal? Initially, we did it. For all these years we were doing. Anything that we came up, we wanted to test it with some animals. Not only that, I'm sad to say we also have done it on human beings, because the ethical research committee was not active. Some people coming from these particular traditions, they felt some human beings are lesser human beings. You can conduct experiments on them. Based on the experiments you conduct on these people, you can find out whether it is safe to use or not on another set of people. This would not have happened if people from this background, our tradition, were equipped enough and they were part of these medical research ethics committees. Because all human beings are equal. Just because of the skin color, can you say some people are less equal? No, that is totally illogical, illegal, unethical, right? These considerations are coming from the traditions from where you believe. So therefore, it is not just about past. These are quite valid. Engaging with these thoughts will allow us to address many of the issues that we are facing today. I just gave you one small set or one area where this is relevant, but there are many areas too where they're relevant.
I think that was absolutely wonderful, that we need to understand how we are going to take it and take it forward. Promotion, we are trying to do KTPI promotion. Mainly, I'm making children understand what is the treasure in KTPI and how children are not taking, sir, for your information. We are trying to, CBSE is trying to sell this subject, but everybody wants to know, what will I get if I study this subject? So we are just trying to make children understand there is a treasure there. At least I'm very happy that 200 children are here today in various rooms, but somewhere somebody gets moved into into it. I mean, that is what we are looking at. And I think
I really like to add to all of you children that you're fortunate to have teachers and the kind of leadership that you are having who are encouraging you to read these subjects. So some subjects you may not understand the value immediately, but this is what that will give you that enough courage, that strength, and not to be a straw in the stream. Where do you draw that energy from? In fact, it is these sources which will give you that strength.
thank you so much. Yeah, after vote of thanks, I request the participants to stay back. I'm just going to share a couple of things. So we have a student also giving thanks here. We have from CIRS, somebody is wanting to give vote of thanks. And then we have Veena ma'am from Arya Gurukul.
Yes, I'm Shreyansh from CIS. On behalf of all the students of CIS, sir, I give you a delightful thank you, sir. Like today, what we learned was apart from a textbook, like it also is a part of textbook. But the analogy you gave, like how personally you explained Charuaka, was very easy to understand, sir. Our textbook also contains some typical words, but your explanation gave us a lot more than that, sir. And as Bharatins, we should actually know what we are and what we stand on. And our roots should be within us. Today, you taught us that Bharat is not only a 75-year-old country, it's a 5,000 or more old civilization. Sir. We will be ever thankful to you for this, sir. Also to Shanti ma'am, who has provided us with this opportunity to interact with such people. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir.
Welcome. Thank you. So we have now Veena ma'am, Veena from Arya Gurukul. She's been one of the teachers who have done a lot of work for the children. We did sample question papers and a lot of work has been done by Veena ma'am. Yes, Veena ma'am.
Hariam all. I'll start my gratitude with a quote. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. It really means a lot. This act for today, because I really want to give a deep gratitude itself. Unless until you given deep exposure or deep knowledge about it, it's a bit vague topic to understand. But then it was so beautifully presented, even that good. And I should tell all the students that, but also you have today learned how to answer analytical questions that appears in the paper, because that really adds up. Because textual answers we always give, but the knowledge what we have got, the analysis what we are supposed to do, that is what is required. And today's sir's workshop was brilliant because of that. So sir, thank you so much for that. I would also like to thank Arunima ma'am, as she's not there, but still it was really great that she was also there. Shanti amma, I would like to have this deep gratitude to you too, because without you, we all couldn't have got this platform itself to have an interaction with each other. And we couldn't have got Vinayachandra ji to this platform even. So thank you, Amma. Thank you all the school teachers and students for making a part of this particular workshop. Thank you, Amma. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Veena. Thank you, Vinayachandra ji. We are indebted to you for this wonderful session that we had here. Thank you so much. Just for the information of all of you, I think all of you are familiar with the changes that CBSE has made. So the chapters 2, 3, 5, 8, and 9, I think, I mean, the PowerPoint is not opening here. I don't know why. This is about, they have made 4 of the chapters. How many of you are aware about it clearly? The 4 chapters you will not be tested in the examination in the class 11. You have to do portfolios. And those who have not seen, please go to the website, CBSE website. It says very clearly, chapter 2, chemistry in India, chapter 5, Indian traditional knowledge and environmental conservation, then 8, mathematics in India, and 9, theatre and drama in India. They are only for internal assessment. And out of these 4 also, you have to do one project in first term and another project in the second term. You can do, out of the 4 topics, you can do any 2 as projects. And other 2 topics, you will be tested. They will be doing a debate or a scrapbook or a role play or panel discussion, or you can make a comic strip or an art integration or anything that comes to your mind. You can take it in an approach for that. So what we have done is the first session you had on the Indian philosophical systems. The next session is going to be on one of the projects we are doing on the mathematics in India. So that in the first term, if you want to take it up as a project, or you want to do as a portfolio, as any other thing, scrapbook activity or anything, because I personally feel this. I was very happy to be part of this deliberations which CBSE conducted, and a lot of other people were also there. They deliberated, and this has come to a conclusion that 4 topics will not be tested for examination, written examination at the end term, but you will be doing a project and either portfolio or a scrapbook, these 4 chapters. And these talks that we are organizing are going to be more helpful when you're doing a project, I'm telling you, where you have a scope for going beyond your own thinking. You can do your research and do it. So I request you to pay attention very carefully. Mathematics in India is the next one, which is going to be done on the 19th. Normally we do it on Saturday, since Vinayachandra ji was not available, so I put it on Friday. Next, after 2 weeks from now, 19th August, Friday, Saturday, same time, 10 to 12. We have a very eminent speaker, Sri Vinay Nair, who is with also working and doing a lot of research and working from Mumbai. He is doing wonderful work for mathematics. He is going to do a session on mathematics in India, which is going to give you a lot of scope for your research. You sit there and note it down, your scrapbook will be ready. I can tell you that. You can do it for term 1. If you do it, pay attention. And your asking questions gives a lot of motivation to us to organize. See, it's reaching out to people. I do a research, I find out. And Michelle himself suggested that you should get somehow Vinay for this topic. And we are getting the top people. They're giving their time only for the sake of all the children who are studying this subject. And I'm also going to CBSE is going to help in identifying which are the other schools which are doing. We want to take it forward. National education policy talks about Indianness being taught to children. The Indian, there's a very important aspect that is there, and everybody is going to struggle, and KTPI children are going to be having a lead in that. And I'm sure you're not wasting your time. Don't think it's a waste of time. You'll really, really get a lot of benefit out of this. And please come 10-15 minutes before, come with a notebook and note it down. Wherever possible, if you sit in a separate mission, you can ask as many questions as possible, interact with them. That will make it more lively. We are also planning to have, I'm going to have a few of the teachers, I'm going to discuss with some of the teachers doing KTPI, come out with ideas where you can present your portfolios and projects in this. And CBSE is giving a very big, clearance to me for doing all of that. He said, please let us know what you're doing. So you are going to share your projects, and we'll publish it also. We will publish it, and CBSE is our, we'll see how it can be utilized by the people all over. So it's going to give a wonderful opportunity for all of you, and everybody else in the school should feel jealous that you are doing KTPI. They should try, and they are getting amazing exposure to the subject. So let us take it forward. Thanks to all the teachers who are present here. Thanks to the principal, Mrs. Rajeshwari, who has also been here. Let us take it forward. If somebody asked this question, how do we, who will patronize it? We have to patronize it. You all have to patronize this subject. Then it will take it forward. Thank you so much. And let us do the Shanti part and close with this. Anybody want to ask anything? For the details, you can go to CBSE academic site. The sample papers are also there. You can take a look at it. A team has worked for this, and a lot of deliberations are happening on the subject. So probably you need anything to know, you can write to us. You can please write to us. And last year, whatever we recorded 7 sessions for class 12 for the information of teachers, we'll put it in Education Cell YouTube video. You can show it to the 12th standard children. This year, we are dedicating it to class 11 syllabus. We'll have all the chapters covered in this. We are getting best of speakers to address. Any suggestions, anything, please do write to us. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let us do the Shanti part. Let's all sit straight and close our eyes. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudashchate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Hari Om. Thank you so much. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was really grateful to have sir